I just want first to introduce ourselves. So meet your presenters for today. I'm Joao Hellmeister. I'm a risk and compliance manager for Canonical. And with me, I have Jean-Charles Verdié. So Jean-Charles, or JC, can you please introduce yourself? Quick introduction.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm JC. I am the head of the device history engineering team at Canonical, and I'm based in Yemen.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that. I'm very happy to have JC here with us today because now, as he said, he's the head of our field engineering team directly related to devices. So most of the things we'll talk about, he actually sees in practice. He sees our customers facing challenges with those kinds of things, and he actually helped many of our customers to deal with that. So he'll be providing valuable inputs for us as well for some real world cases, or like how does that actually apply on our real world scenario. So covering our agenda for today, we're going to do a quick introduction of the CRA, just set up the stage, and also do a quick recap if you joined our webinar last week about what is the CRA and the whole introduction to the topic. But here, we just want to do a quick introduction to set the stage, and then talk about what are the main requirements arising from this new regulation. Then we're going to deep dive into the actual devices, IoT devices realm. We're going to talk a little bit about the context for those device manufacturers and what are the key challenges that those companies face today. Then we're going to talk dig a little bit deeper into vulnerability management, and also how can these device manufacturers make sure that their products are secure and compliant to the CRA. I'm going to share some other resources that we have as well that can help the audience with further education on the CRA, and then we'll open up for questions at the end. So you're free to send your questions throughout the webinar, but we're going to answer those just at the end. So let's do the introduction. So if I could summarize the CRA in one slide, this is what I came up with. It's the new regulation for products with digital elements that are placed in the European Union market. So you see a lot of the PDE acronym coming up. So just understand that this is short for product with digital elements. So why this regulation was put together is because the lawmakers in the EU thought that there should be a better way to safeguard consumers and business using those products, and also make sure that those consumers knows that those products are secure and they're going to be maintained through their whole life cycle. They plan to achieve that by putting requirements into those companies to have a secure design, secure configuration, and also teach the users to securely operate those devices, those products, and also provide lifecycle maintenance, so providing security updates and any other type of maintenance that is needed throughout the product lifespan. The scope of the CRA is products with digital elements, but what makes a PDE is any sort of product that connects to either a network or another device. And they are categorized into main 4 categories, which is the default, the important class 1, important class 2, and critical. So the default is claimed to be 90% of the products are placed in the EU market today. Important class 1 and 2, and critical are pretty much based on the NIS2 definitions as well. So we have more information about that on the early webinar if you want to know a little bit more about that. Just as important as what is in scope is actually what's out of scope. So there are some specific categories of products that are also out of scope of the CRA, meaning that we have websites and pure SaaS solutions or services. Those are out of scope. Free and open source software, if they're not directly monetized or involved in commercial activities, are also exempt from the CRA. Sectors that or products that are related to sectors that have already regulations related to cybersecurity, resilience, and functional safety are also out of scope. So sectors like medical devices, motor vehicles, aeronautical equipment, all those sectors already have their own specific regulations about cybersecurity, about functional safety. So they are not included in the CRA. And the last category is what they call special PDEs. But it boils down to PDEs that are developed for the purpose of national security, pretty much. The timeline, it's supposed to be adopted now in late 2024. So we expect that is published in October, and then it's going to be enforceable 36 months after. So in late 2027, with the particular characteristics of the reporting obligation to actually arise 21 months after the publication. So then it would be 2026 for reporting vulnerabilities and any security incidents related to the product. And now the main objectives is actually make sure that those products are secure before and after they are sold until they are put out of the market. So, being robust design, a robust security measure, and also a robust vulnerability management process, so you can make that product secure from the time you place it in the market for the time you remove it from the market.
Yeah, just Joao, just wanted to point out that timeline might sound like we have a lot of time, but 21 months is not unusual in the development life cycle of a device. So people who are planning to deploy devices in 2026 or 2027, they are already working on this, which means that this is already a subject that is very important.
Indeed. We know that also, compliance takes time. You need to take a look at your processes. You need to make sure that you have everything in place. Once that product is placed on the market, you already have done everything, right? So you need to make sure that you cover everything that you need before you actually put that product on the market. So the clock has already started, even though the legislation or the regulation has not been published yet. The clock has already started for a lot of companies out there. So for who the CRA is applicable, right? It's applicable to anyone involved in the process of building or delivery of product in the European Union market. So manufacturers, which are the entities that actually produce and deliver those products to the consumers, but also providers, which are defined by entities that provide components or either software that are used by these manufacturers or embed those components and software into their products, and the importers or distributors, which are entities that doesn't necessarily manufacture them, but also place them into the market. And as I say here, there's a little star on the software because now software includes both proprietary and open source software. And in light of the open source component, the lawmakers had actually made changes to the regulation to introduce the role of the steward, which is, if I could summarize that, they're like guardians of open source software that are used in PDEs, but they had some nuances, and we're going to explain that in the next slide. So long story short is that the CRA, when it was first drafted, there was a lot of concern in the open source community because when you read that, it pretty much placed a lot of burden into open source projects that are maybe maintained by a couple of developers on their own time, and they would be required to have that level of requirements to comply to, and that would be very hard. And at the end, it would stop innovation and would not encourage people to develop and contribute to open source software. So there was a lot of voice or active voices in the open source community that reached out to the lawmakers, and eventually, they understood that. And what came up is that now they made changes to the regulation to first make a clear exemption for free and open source software that are developed or supplied outside of commercial activity. And that includes support and consulting / implementation services. So even though you don't practically sell your product, but you provide services like support, you provide services like I'll help you implement that, or like I'll give you some consulting services to help you use that product better at your enterprise. Is categorized as commercial activity, so you're not exempted from the CRA. But if you are not in that capacity, or like you're just a developer that contributes to an open source project, then you're exempted from any liabilities or financial penalties that are related to the CRA. So if you are an open source company or an open source project, and you do commercialize it somehow, you monetize it somehow, you can claim the steward role. And the steward role is pretty much, as I said in the earlier slide, guardian of the open source software. So it has less stringent requirements than a manufacturer or a provider. but still needs to adhere to a minimum security baseline and also need to proactively and actively collaborate with manufacturers now to resolve issues and patch vulnerabilities that are eventually found on the components that they provide. So the main obligations or the main requirements related to the CRA are pretty much four. So if you, again, going back to the first webinar, take a look at that. We're going to explore a lot of those into the webinar. So I'll provide a link to that in the end of this presentation as well, so you can take a look later. But the main requirements are risk assessment, documentation, have your conformity assessment in place, and have your vulnerability reporting process implemented as well. So the first one, risk assessment, is pretty much making sure that your product is placed in the market without known exploitable vulnerabilities. It's shipped secure by default, and also limiting the data processing, and also with a limited attack surface. So making sure that before you put that into market, you make your due diligence, you make sure that that product is secure and is delivered on a secure by default state. Documentation means that you as a manufacturer need to have documentation that needs to be delivered with the product that explains your product design process, your product delivery, your development process, and how you're going to do vulnerability management. On top of that,
sorry, let me jump in on this, on documentation and risk assessment. I really want to emphasize that for embedded devices, it's very critical, because unlike devices in data center, where all of them are basically in the same places, our devices are scattered across country or across the world. And any kind of vulnerability that might lead to a device takeover, it can blow out of proportion. If you need to send someone to restore a device, physically speaking, it can blow out of proportion. So this is very critical. The processing of data, of course, is very important, because devices are limited in terms of bandwidth, in terms of energy, and also for cost and environmental issues. And all of this needs to be taken care of. And the only way to take care of this is what is described in documentation. So you need, of course, to have a proper software design. You have to consider security by design, and not just like the final touch on top of your product. And of course, with the explosion of open source software, the software bill of material is very important, because you need to understand what kind of software is shipped with your device.
Exactly. And you need to have everything in place. So, you might as well, as we said, start now, because depending on the complexity of your product or your device, there's a lot of work to be done to understand exactly what goes into that product, and what are the, any dependencies that you have. Third one is the conformity assessment. So it's more like the formal stage, but you need to deliver your product with what they call the CE marking. So it's actually in a product that has already been verified, either by self-attestation, depending on your product classification, but also with a formal EU certification, or a report by an independent third-party attestation company or an auditor to accompany your product. When consumers see it, they can understand that, hey, this has passed through this assessment, and so I can trust that this product is secure. And the last one is vulnerability reporting, which is kind of tricky, because the CRA introduces a very tight schedule for vulnerability reporting. So any actively exploited vulnerabilities in your component or in your product, in your device, but also security instance, need to be reported to ENISA, which is the European Cybersecurity Agency, in 24 hours. So it's a tight schedule. So you need to make sure that you have that process defined, and they'll train people and they'll have the right mechanisms to understand and identify when something like this happens. So then you can meet your vulnerability reporting deadlines as well. So this is just kind of set the stage. Now I think we can dig a little bit into the specific context and the key challenges for devices. And to start, a little bit of the context is that, especially from the IoT devices perspective, there has been a market change and also growth, right? So devices are now omnipresent. They're everywhere. They're more connected than ever. They're connecting to everything. Like in your home, you should probably have a couple of maybe, not a couple, but maybe 5 to 10 devices that are actually connecting to other devices in your house or are connecting outside of your house. Also, you have companies that have like fleets of devices scattered, as JC said, like they're scattered everywhere. So it became more complex to manage all of that. They have more software than ever. So there are devices with full-fledged operating systems. There are complex languages and lots of libraries embedded on those devices as well.
And this shed some light on this. You have to realize that 20 years ago, all embedded devices were shipped with code developed in house, and now it's probably like 99% of the software which is not developed in house. In the same span of time, the line of code metrics exploded. It came from thousands of line of code per device to millions of line of code per device. So obviously, mechanically, it brings more vulnerabilities. It's much more complex to manage all of this integrated software, all of these languages which carry a lot of libraries and so on. So it's a very different game.
And to top that, I think we have seen a lot of news about faulty devices that are starting to come up, and sometimes those, if devices are faulty or they fail in some capacity, they can also cause harm to users. So the CRA was actually a call for strengthening the security of those devices. So as we said, it calls for robust and secure design, but also support through the whole life cycle. So it comes to give a call to all those device manufacturers to make sure that those products are secure, and then users, when are selecting which products to buy, they can have a good, straightforward way to check if a product is secure for them to use it or not. So I guess JC can definitely expand on that, but what I see is that the key challenges for those device manufacturers on a broad perspective, not entering into the CRA just now, but there is this issue for the scalability. How can you iterate and develop new versions of your own device without having to just rebuild it from scratch? Or how can you grow and manage your fleet of devices in a securely controlled way? How can you do proper monitoring of the devices or your fleet at the device level? Check the status of such a device. See, hey, is there any alerts flagging? Do I need to do any update or maintenance on that device? And then when you come to that, how can you properly resolve this at the individual device level? As JC was saying, like, do I need to send someone physically check on that device and apply some of the measures that are needed? And then if I need to deliver an update to a large fleet, how can I do that in a secure and controlled manner? So I guess this is kind of what we see as the main challenges for those manufacturers out there.
Yeah, as I said, the game has completely changed in terms of software, and what CRA calls for is to bring people back to reason. So shipping devices with a fire and forget code that you don't care about and that you will never maintain, it's out of the plate now. You have to think about how you will be able to handle this over time, which means that you cannot just keep on developing new code and just forgetting about this. You need to think about how you will be able to maintain it, how you will be able to update it. And it brings back the value of reusing some code and componentizing, containerizing, and making your code more reusable. So this is an important part in terms of scalability.
That's great. Now, putting the CRA into play now, as we kind of discussed earlier, the manufacturers as a broad role, they are presented with this need to formally comply with the requirements, like product documentation. You'll produce your product manuals, like hardening manuals, secure operations manuals, have that software bill of materials in place. Make sure that you have a secure design and release of the product, which boils down to like, is my product free for any exploited vulnerabilities when I'm going to place that into the market? How will I do maintenance and patching to comply with the vulnerability management requirement? And then at the end, how will I get the self-attestation or actually the certification that I need to be able to put that product into the market. So now I think we're going to focus on the two in the middle, which I think are more pressing right now, like product documentation. It's something that you can do while the SBOM can give you a hard time. There's still something that it's fairly straightforward. The attestation and certification, just do the work and get someone to check your compliance at the end. But secure design and release, vulnerability management, they're a little bit more tricky. So I guess this is the ones that we want to dig a little bit deeper right now. So in terms to secure design and release, the requirements are for manufacturers to provide information about your process, right? So your process needs to be more open now, like what are the checks that you're doing throughout the process, how you're making sure that, security is embedded into the whole so the product design and release life cycle. Are you minimizing the attack surface? Are you including any type of functionality or components that are not relevant or just adding risks to that device? Are you minimizing data processing or making that device effective? And then making sure that the product has known exploitable vulnerabilities, which means need to do security testing of the components and also mitigating those before the actual release of the product or placing the product into the market. So now for me, it boils down to have a well-designed and implemented secure development lifecycle, which is something that all companies must have, but it's really tricky to implement, to define what is the correct process for your company or for your device.
Yeah, so a lot of things in this, and despite the fact that SBOM is in the documentation, it's a very useful tool to make sure that you cover all of your bases, if I may say, because this is the right way to know how many libraries and which one you are carrying on which version, and to make sure that you're able to track all of these known exploitable vulnerabilities. Because it's not only that there are thousands of libraries, but each of these libraries come with thousands of different revisions, and you don't really want to change all of this. And if you do not have a containerized system, it's very hard to upgrade something without upgrading something else. And I just wanted to shed some light about the way we are doing SSDLC in Canonical. We have two important tools for this. The first one is what we call security threat modeling, which means that all of our software, all of our tools are designed with security threat modeling, which means that we are studying what is this tool doing and how can it be attacked? What can be the weak points and how can people who want to hurt this will do? And the second part is penetration testing, which is very useful to make sure that we minimize the attack surface, because everything that is open must have a good reason to be open.
Indeed, we're definitely trying to, Canonical is going to be compliant to the CRA. We're not going to take these to our role. We're going to be, we're going to put ourselves to the test to actually be 100% compliant to all of the requirements. And all of that starts with a good STOC, as we were discussing, and really happy that we're taking those steps and implementing all those checks and balances throughout the process, making sure that our products are secure for our customers to use that. Next one, vulnerability management. So we kind of touched a little bit, but what the regulation actually requires the manufacturers to do is first maintain security during the product lifespan. So now, as we talked a little bit earlier as well, making sure that you support that product through its whole life cycle, from the time you put it into market until it's removed or replaced by a newer device in the market, right? So that means fixing vulnerabilities as they are reported and distribute patches to users or other devices, but also reporting vulnerability. Like if you find something in your product, but it's not maintained by you, it's not a component that you develop yourself, you need to reach out to your provider and say, hey, I have a vulnerability here. We need to coordinate that, work on now resolving these, like developing a patch, applying those patches, and then delivering to the whole fleet or whatever is the context. Also, on the other hand, if you find something, you quickly develop a patch and you can reach out to the provider and say, hey, I found a vulnerability, already patched it. Here's the patch. And then that provider can also share that to other companies if they also use that component to their devices or in the other products as well. And last, the reporting obligation to ENISA, which is then something that we say like, hey, the timelines are tight, right? You have 24 hours from the time you become aware to actually go there and report either exploited vulnerability or a security incident to ENISA. So you need to have proper processes in place. When I look at all of this, I read this as, a call for accountability. So you need, or the CRA is asking you to have accountability for all components on your device or your devices. So making sure that, once you place that product into market, you are accountable for keeping that secure through the whole life cycle. And you need to have a good process in place to do that.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, of course, everybody knows that Ubuntu comes with 10 years, or up to 12 years of support called LTS, that is extended to a lot of libraries, like 25,000 libraries in the Universe repository. But from now on, we're also fixing something called KAV, which is known as known exploited vulnerabilities, which means that if a vulnerability has been reported in the past and has been exploited in the market on another device, we're also fixing this, which means that we are going even further than what CRA is mandating.
Yeah, again,
this is obviously something that requires a lot of self-discipline, a lot of very strong process and very tight schedule control. Because as you said, the timeline is very tight, 24 hours to report a bug. And obviously you have very little time to fix it and to deploy it.
Exactly. And, the CRA is a collection of good best practices that companies should implement, right? I guess I'm glad that we are actually taking it to the next level, as you said, working on the CAVs and on the non-exploited vulnerabilities, and taking an actual step to actually help our customers, to go above and beyond. I guess related a little bit to vulnerability management as well, like a key component for you to achieve that is fleet and device management. We talked a little bit earlier as one of the challenges for device manufacturers in a broad sense. But when it comes to vulnerability management and achieving the requirements of the CRA, you also need to stay on top of that. You need to actually have a good centralized place to monitor your devices, check the statuses, control when and how you're going to deliver updates, and do that in an efficient manner as well. So I think that, there are tools for do that, but, I've seen companies do that in a decentralized way. And then, it's really tricky as your fleet scales and grows. So there's definitely a need for, you as a device manufacturer to stay on top of that and know the best way that we can think of, have a proper centralized monitoring to check everything on the device, and then be able to, act on the individual device level, delivering those updates in a controlled and efficient way would be the way to go here.
Yeah, this is the reason why the Landscape, which is our fleet and device management tool, it comes for free whenever you purchase a Ubuntu Pro license, because we believe that remote management of fleet of devices is something that's so critical to your software lifecycle and to product lifecycle that it should be part of the product. It's not something else.
And it's, we're kind of preaching to the choir for like you and me, but, it's a really great tool for you to manage, your fleet at scale, right? Either it's your Ubuntu state or your fleet of devices. It's a very powerful management tool.
Being able to deploy a patch, to deploy a live patch for your kernel, to upgrade your devices, or even to you need to shut them down for a while. It's critical. As I said, you don't want someone to take a car and to drive across Europe or across the world to turn off or on all of the devices.
I just want to now include a little bit more of the open source context into the conversation. I know, as JC said before, now the context is different, right? Yeah, it's more and more software embedded into devices, and those are not developed in-house. And what most companies are doing, as this statistic says, 90% of commercial applications have some sort of open source code into it. And when you go to analyzing those code bases, not only open source but no code bases as a whole, 80% of those has at least one vulnerability, which takes almost 100 days to fix it. And sometimes they hang in there for a while, right? You see here 32% of those critical vulnerabilities are older than 5 years. So no, it's a tricky process. It's not easy to do that. And to add more complexity into the mix, you have now this statistic that says around 70 dependencies on an open source project with others. So the SBOM component, as JC said, is critical. You need to understand, what comprises your product, what dependencies you have for you to be properly doing that risk assessment, doing that risk management, and make sure that the product is secure, and you're understanding and identifying any vulnerabilities that relate to dependencies on your product. And we have addressed this as well. Open source is being considered into the CRA, right? We have like the exemption, we have the steward role, and we have also, the option for open source companies who, I guess, want to play the enterprise game to be accountable and step up and take the role of the manufacturer, like a common provider. But no, we need to define the role, right? And as many companies and devices today are using open source software pooling libraries more and more, the CRA still calls for accountability. And that means that, if you are using an open source software library or something that, it's a component of your device, and your provider, it's just like a small project that is maintained by a couple of developers, and they don't need to be overburdened with that requirement, accountability still needs to be taken. So, either the manufacturer steps up and makes sure that, he's covering that piece for that particular piece of software, or he needs to change the software it's used, because it's going to be a risk and probably a liability as well. So the nuances of open source are somehow complex, especially when you put that into the CRA component, because you are definitely free to use open source software. You can include embedded, but there's that caveat. Okay, how am I secure that this product or this piece of software is going to be maintained? How I'm comfortable enough that this product's going to have security patches timely delivered? Will I have support for that as well? So I guess to top that off, so there are some questions that need to be done, right? So if you are a device manufacturer, are you properly managing the supply chain risk, right? I guess this is the main question that comes to my mind. So, your device is made of a lot of components. And as we kind of discussed, a lot of those are not under your control. You're just pulling that, or you are being supplied by another provider. So you need to make sure that, you're covering your bases. Like, are your providers aware of the CRA requirements? Are they willing, to step up and make sure that they help you comply to that as well? Are you comfortable enough with the level of security support and timely delivery of any fixes or updates or security patches that those providers will get you? And if you are extend that to open source, is the project maintained, right? You might be pulling something to your device that maybe it's an open source library that is not actively maintained, and it becomes a risk. So maybe you need to change that particular piece of software or component, or you need to step up and then start taking care of that, making sure that any vulnerabilities that you found in that library, you'll be patching that, you'll be developing the patches, you're going to then coordinating all of that as well. So there are a lot of questions, there are a lot of nuances, and the main thing for me, as I said before, is the supply chain risk properly managed. So to do then a quick recap now of what we just discussed, because we want to open up for questions as well. So CRA is pushing for new requirements, right? So there is increasing need for have risk assessment, documentation, vulnerability management for you at the end get your CE mark and your certification, and be able to comfortably put your place into the EU market. the entry into force is close, which we won't be expecting that to be in October. But as we also said, the clock has already started. Device manufacturers that want to put products on the market in 2027 or 2026 already started their process. So you need to start considering all those things as well. And as JC said, we can help, right? We've been helping clients with that, and we have like a whole suite of products that can help you be compliant, but also take you to the next level as well if needed. So you already be using certified products that we will certify our products under the CRA as well, and those will help you comply as well, but also making sure that you have a good and secure set of tooling that can help you and your device also to be safe and help consumers be safe and securely use those products as well. Then at the end, just as JC has been saying, now we want to do the sales pitch a little bit, but I'll guarantee it's going to be quick, 30 seconds for that. As JC was saying, so we have like the Ubuntu Core, which is, just a really only what you need version of Ubuntu for your device, which means limited attack surface. Ubuntu Pro, which can cover your open source stack with 12 years of support for all Ubuntu packages, but are going to expand into the universe as well, as JC said before. And then, for the good fleet management, you can also use Landscape, which it already comes like with Ubuntu Pro if you subscribe to Ubuntu Pro. But then we will provide you centralized management of your fleet, but also automated and controlled patching to all of your devices, also with the good monitoring piece of capabilities as well.
Yeah, it's important to know that Landscape is able to monitor and to control your fleet of devices, whether they are running Ubuntu Core or Ubuntu with a Pro license. And whichever version you pick because of your needs, because of your context, and because of many reasons that might bring you to choose Ubuntu Core or not to choose Ubuntu Core, no matter what, you will get the exact same level of security support in terms of kernel, in terms of libraries. Everything is the same. It's just a different way of addressing the market, but this is the same product and the same security processes that are applied to both versions.
And now, as promised, some more resources that you can take a look to get maybe more acquainted with the CRA, but also dig a little bit deeper as well into some good reading material about which way to go, either like a build platform like Yocto or using Ubuntu Core for embedded devices. So first link will take you to 2 blog posts from our CISO about the CRA. So just a quick breakdown. And then a good sharing your thoughts on like what that means for open source. Then, as promised, the link to the first webinar that we did, which is just a general, what is the CRA, what are the impacts, and how would you go about getting compliant to that new regulation. And then a white paper about how does using an embedded, the build platform or Ubuntu Core for your embedded Linux on your device. Discussing what are the pros and cons of Yocto, Ubuntu, and then how does that all relate to the upcoming Cyber Resilience Act as well. I'll just leave it here for a while so you can take the QR code if needed. And then now we can open up for questions. So thank you everyone for joining so far. We now take the questions.
Thank you.
All right, so let's take a look at the questions now. We've been monitoring both the Q&A here, but also the LinkedIn, so I'll start tackling those. We do have some time cap around it, but I'll try to cover as much as I can. So first we have a question about, you mentioned that the certificate will be a CE certificate. Does mean that you have a CE mark, it will cover the Cyber Resilience Act? And if yes, what are the measures that are to detect fake CE marks? So yes, ideally, what the regulation says, if you achieve the CE marking related to the CRA, then you are automatically compliant, and the consumers will see that CE marking on the product and will say like, okay, this is a secure product. So it's been through a certification or a self-attestation process that can easily say that has been compliant. Regarding how to detect fake CE marking, it hasn't been issued yet, anything related to that, but it's a general concern, right? With the CRA or not, it's a general concern of how to detect that, and it's up to the regulator to set up the proper monitoring measures or detecting measures around that. So I don't have any context about that, sorry. But it's a general concern, right? Not only from the CRA perspective, but from a broader market regulation perspective. And I'm not sure. Well, to this day, what can I tell you is that there's not been anything particularly issued related to the CRA. It's a broader concern, and it's being tackled as the broader picture as well. Another question that we have here. So we are hosting a virtual server for one of our EU clients. To be compliant, must our hardware be or just the client VMs? Depending on the role, right, of that infrastructure and the VMs. So if you look at our previous webinar, there are some exclusions or exemptions. So if you're just hosting like a SaaS service that is not doing any remote data processing, then it's not applicable to the CRA. But depending on the role of the hardware, if it's actively supporting those VMs, and those VMs are actually supporting a product that is being placed in the EU market, and if that product is under the CRA scope, then yes, the hardware should be. But depends on a little bit on the context, right? So the question you should ask is into the product. So I guess if you ask that question, when you get your answer, you're probably going to be able to see if you need to do anything about it or not. But from a general perspective, from what I read, yes, it probably means that this hardware is supporting a critical function of this product that is being placed in the market in the EU, so it needs to be compliant as well. So we have one other question here. I'm not sure if I got that correctly. In case you supply free open source software but charge money for support, do you or do you not have to comply? You have to comply with the CRA. So providing support for open source is considered commercial activity under the CRA. So then you will be required to comply with the CRA. So the exemption, the full exemption, is for those open source projects that are not actively monetizing it. So there's still discussion on what actively monetizing means, right? But the CRA has defined some guidelines in terms of, are you providing consulting services? Are you providing support? And are you providing any sort of direct monetization from the project? Then yes, it's considered commercial activity, and then you need to comply with the CRA. Another question here is, when the CRA goes into effect, what entity will check the manufacturer's compliant, if they will check all manufacturers out there? So if you go to our last webinar, we kind of touched a little bit about that. So one of the already foreseen difficulties is, there would be a huge amount of products, and I'm not sure how many certifying bodies will be out there to actually do the certification for all of those products, all of those devices. So during this transitional period between, once it comes the entry into force and the actual enforcement of the law or the regulation, there's going to be some guidelines, some other delegated acts that will hopefully clarify that a little bit better. But one of the difficulties that have been foreseen already is that particular issue. So that could go either way, right? You could just ask people to start self-attesting, and once you have those certifying bodies or already certifying companies that will be allowed to do the certification, then as this number of companies or certifying bodies grow, then you can start enforcing that a little bit more. So still to be seen, but yes, it's a very good question, actually. So there's going to be a lot of challenges into actually, once it comes into force, there's going to be a lot of more products needing to have that certification, and we're not sure exactly how the European Union is going to take care of that. So the checking would be definitely by a certified body, right? So if you only need to do self-attestation, you just do self-attestation, you just produce your documentation about the self-attestation, you provide that along with the product, and you should be fine. But the other thing is more tricky, is that, okay, I need to actually get an external certification or external certification body to come here and attest for the product, and that somehow is going to be tricky. So still to be seen, but yes, there is a foreseen difficulty already in that place. And then in the same question, sorry, there was a two-part question. It's about the penalties, right? So the penalty so far is up to 25 million euros or 2.5% of your global turnover or global revenue. So it depends on which is the highest. So another question here, do device manufacturers have to check the status of sold devices that they are not using, or is the update status of those devices in the hands of the customer? Yeah, so on the context of the question, I'm getting that it's just a device that you're not actively, as a manufacturer, you're not actively monitoring, right? So it's just something that you sell to the customer and they're using at their own home. Your responsibility would be to communicate if a new patch is issued, and then help your customer to do that. Obviously, it's going to be ultimately their decision or their responsibility to effectively apply the patch. But you need to do your part, which is communicate them like, hey, there's a new patch, there's a vulnerability found on this product. This is the patch, this is how you get it, this is how you install it, this is how you update the product, and you will be fulfilled your obligation. If you are actively managing or monitoring those devices, then it's your responsibility to actually deliver the updates and the patches. Do I have to patch all vulnerabilities, or can I take precautions that a vulnerability cannot be assessed? That comes into a specific word in the CRA, which is actively exploited, right? So if the vulnerability has been actively exploited, then you need to patch all of those, right? If it's a high or a critical, my understanding you still should, but you can take a risk-based approach if you like. So, okay, it's a high critical vulnerability, but for that to happen, it's really unlikely, or it's like on the scenario that my product is deployed, this doesn't make sense. But you still need to document that approach, right? So you need to update your risk assessment, as we discussed, like one of the main requirements of the CRA is have a documented risk assessment. So you document that in your risk assessment, and you tell customers why this is not patched. So you will at least be transparent, right? You need to be transparent about your decisions on the product. But if it's being actively exploited, and this is the key word, right? Actively exploited, then you need to patch all of those. I guess we cleared all of the Q&A on Right Talk. Let me take a look at LinkedIn if we have anything incoming from there. Sorry, just a sec. I'm refreshing just to make sure that I cover everything. Yes, not anything. So I guess I'll just hang in another 30 seconds if there are any more questions. If I didn't answer correctly one of the questions before, also please do a follow-up, and I can provide more details if needed.
I don't see any additional question on LinkedIn. I was just checking. Yeah, for those of you who had trouble seeing the slides because they were blurry for some people, they will be shared after the show. The webinar is ended. So don't worry, you will be able to see them.
Yeah, in the announcement section, there's also some documentation about the resources that we have shared a little bit earlier as well. In the presentation, you have the QR code as well. So if you want to then save it for later, it's going to be available there as well. Really recommend taking a look at all of those resources, like really insightful ones. Our first webinar was kind of covering more the basis, so what the general perspective, what it is. We also talk about deadlines or what to expect in this transitional period, which was one of the questions we're related to. So feel free to check that as well. The recording is available. And I want to thank everyone for joining today. Been a pleasure. JC, also, thank you for joining me today and bringing the perspective of the actual field, what happens in the real world, right? We talk a lot about regulations and what's written on paper, but nothing like the field experience on what happens out there. So again, everyone, thanks for joining. Stay tuned for more updates, and have a great rest of your day.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.